Hi, everyone, and welcome to Gen Z Votes. My name is Pratik, and on this episode today, we are lucky to have Tsion Amare joining us. For a little bit of background on her, she's a first-generation American social and political worker, as well as a fellow member of Gen Z. She's a former legislative staffer serving during the 87th legislative session. She's a graduate of Abilene Christian University and is a project manager at the Environmental Defense Fund, where she works with legislators on environmental policy. And I'm greatly I greatly appreciate the time you're taking today and the opportunity you're giving me. Thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
Yes. So, just to start, how has your journey been so far? You're extremely young and have done a lot already. So, tell us about your path, your childhood, and what led you to be where you are.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Ethiopia. My family and I came to the States when I was 10 years old. And we came mainly in search of a better educational opportunities for my sister and I. And so I grew up in North Dallas. I went to school at Abilene Christian University where I pursued a bachelor's degree in social work because I knew I wanted to be in a place where I can give back to my community and serve my neighbors to the best of my abilities. So got my bachelor's in social work, and I knew that when I was doing my bachelor's, I identified a gap between the macro level social work, where the clients that I was serving in social work, if there's policies impacting them, there's nothing is ever going to change. So I knew I needed to be in a place where I can influence those policies impacting the people I love the most and the clients that I was serving. And so I went to pursue my graduate degree from the University of Houston, and I studied social work with a concentration in political social work. And this opened up a door for me to work in the 87th legislative session at our state's capital with Representative Rafael Anchia, and also the Mexican American Legislative Caucus. And during this time, I worked on bills that address housing issues, pensions, retirement and cost of living adjustment for our teachers, criminal justice, and a variety of other issues. And I saw that we needed the people in the Capitol were not representative of the people that they were serving. And I knew that I wanted to be again in the decision at the decision making table, so that I can influence change and be a voice in my community because I knew the dire need for it. And so I worked with my local Democratic Party to kind of gain that local level policy experience. And then currently I work with the Environmental Defense Fund doing a lot of their political work here in Texas. So I was heavily engaged during the 88th legislative session, addressing issues that impacted our neighbors, like the power grid failure that killed over 200 people here in Texas, and energy efficiency, IRA implementation, and all that is what I've been working on in the past year or so. Um, so I just recently ran to represent House District 113 at the state capitol. I'm no longer running for that seat, but during my time, I heard from a lot of constituents, and also just people across the state and across the nation on how refreshing it was for younger voices to be running for office. And that kind of took me aback because I didn't realize there was this big of a support, and I thought people were going to be a little skeptical about having a young person running for office. But people want change. People really, really want change in their communities, and they're not seeing it from their current elected officials. And so I ran for office. I continued my campaign for a little over a month, I believe, and learned a lot of lessons. And now using everything I learned to share with other young candidates, and just young students in general, so that they can run for any seat in their communities and be a voice and feel empowered to do so.
So, being a immigrant as well as a woman of color and as a just generally young person, how would
Yeah.
you describe the struggles maybe you faced while navigating through politics here, and how have you been able to learn from that?
Ooh, there's so many different layers to that, right? Being an immigrant, being a black woman, or being a black person and then being a woman, and on top of that, being young. So there's a lot of different layers to that. The first thing I would say is like I mentioned earlier, the Capitol is not representative of the people of Texas. We have a lot of older white men in the Capitol, and that are making decisions that are going to impact our lives, decisions that they're probably never ever going to experience or see the effects of. For instance, there's a recent immigration law that passed here in Texas, a super racist and harmful immigration bill that the people that passed this bill will never ever experience the direct impact of that bill because they're not in these communities that they're legislating for. And so when I was working in the Capitol and I'm seeing this firsthand, there's not a whole lot of people that look like me, let alone people as young as me working to put laws into place and impact their communities. And there's not a whole lot of people that have on the ground experience. A lot of the Capitol is filled with high income, individually wealthy, or just lawyers and business people, and they're a little disconnected from everyday Texans. And so again, being an immigrant, that my parents have lived in poverty for a really long time. To this day, my parents don't have health care. I've seen the impacts of a lot of these bills on my family and in my communities that I've worked in and in the communities that I live in, which is completely different from what you see at the Capitol. And so when you dissect those layers of how your identity is so disconnected from the people that are legislating on your behalf, it's very disheartening. And that's what kind of motivated me to run for office to begin with, because we cannot have people writing laws on our behalf that don't look like us or that will never experience the everyday things that we do.
Right. And you just talked about not seeing the change that people need. What was like the first, or maybe not the first thing, but generally what motivated you to know, like, to go into social work despite being able to probably pursue many different fields? And yeah, what was your motivation?
Yeah, so I consider myself a religious person. I grew up in a Christian household. And the Christianity that we see now in our society, especially from leaders, is completely different from what I grew up in. I grew up very much service-based family where our faith motivates us to help our neighbors, to see the people around us as brothers and sisters and serve them in the best way. So when I went to Abilene Christian University, I knew so I wanted to pursue social work because I wanted to be in a profession where I can be of service, where I can address societal issues and systematic issues that have impacted our communities, especially Black and Brown communities, for years. I wanted to be in the center of it, understand the intersectionality of different issues. So, for instance, when we talk about poverty and racism, understand the root causes of it and help my neighbors to the best of my ability using my profession. And so I knew I wanted a career of service, and I wanted a career of helping and being at the center of creating change in my community. And that's exactly what social work has allowed me to do. And I'm so thankful for that profession. And again, pursuing a master's degree in social work was also a very easy choice because I knew I wanted to gain that macro level experience to better serve the people I love most and to better serve my neighbors and my family and friends, and all of that. So it's a profession that came very, very naturally.
For sure. So moving on to like policy topics, what areas are you generally most passionate about right now and why?
Yeah, so I can tell you about some of the things that I ran on, and it's some of the things that I'm very much passionate about. So, for instance, gun safety. When we talk about gun safety in today's America, that's something that in this generation, I'm part of Gen Z. We are the only generation that has ever had to do active shooter drills in schools. No other generation can ever relate to this. And we're growing up in this terror because we when we step out of the house, when we go to grocery stores, even within our house, in schools, no churches, nowhere is safe from gun violence. And we're a generation that's growing up in this. And so I've always talked about this. I'm a big advocate for we need gun safety laws that protect our communities because our children don't need to live in fear. We don't need to live in fear. And it's a shame that we've allowed a generation to grow up in doing active shooter drills and being in fear of our lives instead of addressing the issue that's at the center of it. Reproductive health in Texas, that's a big issue. We cannot legislate for women. We cannot, we have autonomy over our own bodies, and that's just a fact. And any other thing is a violence against women. Any other attempts to do so is a violence against women. Housing issues, affordable housing, that's a big thing. There's families that are not able to afford housing, not able to keep the light on. And again, when we talk a lot about these different societal issues, they're all connected somehow. There's intersectionality of issues. Climate is something, of course, that I'm passionate about. When we talk about climate issues and people that are unable to pay their energy cost, we're also the same people are also unable to pay their housing cost. So they're experiencing energy burden and housing instabilities and insecurities. And so a lot of these issues are widely connected, and addressing one is addressing the other. So climate, housing, reproductive health, gun safety is to name a few.
Right. Just to follow up with that, in terms of gun safety, I'm from Florida, and Texas and Florida obviously share similarities in that there's a lack of gun regulations. What changes do you believe we need to see as a nation to move forward?
Again, the common sense gun safety laws. We need to make sure those with mental health conditions are not able to easily access guns. We need to make sure that laws that protect women and men from domestic violence, their partners are not able to access guns and harm them. We need to make sure that the laws that we have right now, they're causing harm. The laws that we have in Florida and Texas, they're causing harm, and they're allowing school shooters and other mass shootings to happen in our communities, and people are the ones that are paying the cost of that, the real life human cost of these bills, senseless gun bills that are passing. Humans are paying the cost for that, and it can be solved. It can be solved with laws, but our lawmakers, our Republican lawmakers, are choosing not to. And so passing this common sense gun reform laws and gun safety laws is essential in protecting human lives and protecting our children, people, so that going to churches and grocery stores and leaving our houses and even staying within our houses is not a threat to our lives.
For sure. And then in terms of environmental issues, which I know you said is another big area, could you first explain some of the work that you've done, and then also could you talk about maybe whether or not we need to transition towards more clean energy sources and what your take on that is?
Absolutely. So, Environmental Defense Fund actually played a huge role in passing the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a historic climate act that will bring in billions of dollars into that energy transition. And so, during the 88th legislative session here in Texas, our EDF Texas team, including myself, played a large role in the power grid conversation. So, Winter Storm Uri happened in 2021, and it took the lives of over 200 people because our power grid failed. And this session was the session we tried to make sure that that does not happen again, and the right measures were taken to fix our power grid, which we did not. But some of the things that I've been working on outside of the legislative session, and even within the legislative session, is addressing environmental injustices, environmental justice issues, especially affecting Black and Brown communities historically, where toxic waste is being dumped in their neighborhoods, where concrete batch plants are being put in their neighborhoods, disproportionately causing health disparities in those neighborhoods. There's communities here in Texas that have a 10-year lower life expectancy than the zip code, the white neighborhood in the zip code next door, and it's Black and Brown neighborhoods, because of these toxic waste sites in their neighborhoods, or other air pollutants that are in that area. And then so addressing environmental justice issues has been a big one. And then energy efficiency and weatherization, making sure that families are educated on energy efficiency and weatherization, advocating for renewable energy, and ensuring that Texas, as we talk about the energy transition, whether that's in Texas, nationally, or even globally, people that have historically been left out of the conversation, left out of the energy sector, like Black and brown people, are included as we have, again, these historic investments coming into our communities, and ensuring that the Justice 40 piece of the IRA is being implemented properly. So those are just some of the snippets that I've been working on.
Cool. Okay, so moving on to now more of the Gen Z aspect. How important do you think that the role of the youth in politics is, and where would you suggest that people get started and when?
Ooh, I think this is the moment that young people need to raise a voice and make an impact. I mean, when you look at a lot of the historical things that happen here in America, a lot of the movements, young people have been leading societal movements for years and years and years. And I always say I think a lot of the times young people are about action. When we see societal issues that are not being met, we take action, versus a lot of other people they talk about the plans, they talk about, okay, here's what we envision, or there might be things that they're not willing to do, and traditions that they rather follow. And so this is the moment for young people to get involved. We have the power, we have the passion, and we have the stories to tell and the experiences to be able to lead change in America. And I think people have been seeing that a whole lot now more than ever. And so what I would tell every young person in America is, if you see an issue in your community, be the change. Stand up, be the change for your community, be the voice for your community. Don't be discouraged by age, don't be discouraged by experience. We need more passionate people in places of power. I think the time of lawmakers that come from wealthy backgrounds and that have that are lawyers and businessmen, and these fields, we've had enough. We need people with on the ground experience. We need passionate people, and we need people that are closest to the problem to be at the decision making table, so we can have real changes in our communities, so we can have people at the decision making table that know what the problem is, that understand what it takes to get to that solution, that understand the work that it needs to take to create a difference.
For sure. And like you mentioned, right now we're obviously in a critical time and going into the next election, presidential election, which is coming up soon. What characteristic and or maybe like policy view is of a candidate do you think is the most important for voters to be educated about? And what do you think that people should try to learn more about before the next election comes?
Yes, so I'll answer your second question first. I think people definitely need to register to vote, register your family, your friends, tell other people to register to vote, because your vote does matter. And I know we say this a lot, but it truly, truly does, because we're seeing elections that people are winning or losing by 1, 2, 3 votes. And so elections matter, your vote matters. And so register to vote, get out and vote. And then get involved in your community in any way, whether that's volunteering for different campaigns, or volunteering for your local homeless shelter or local organization that you're passionate about. Get out and do the work and gain the experience, because again, we need more people that have seen the problem firsthand, not just heard about it and read about it, but that have seen the issue firsthand, that have spoken to people that are experiencing the issue, to be at the decision making table. And I think as we go into this 2024 year, it's going to be really interesting to see a lot of the local, statewide election and the presidential election, and see the outcome of it. Because I think even with Gen Zers, we're a divided bunch, because I think we're a group that votes on a lot of societal issues, that votes on issues versus a person, or a party. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of issues that our candidates are going to be talking about and attempting to address, and in turn gain or lose our votes. And so some of those issues I would say is, for instance, student debt. We are generations with thousands and thousands and thousands of student debt. I myself, I am in a lot of student debt, and that has closed a lot of opportunities for our generation to be homeowners one day, for instance. instance. That's not realistic for a lot of us because we have a lot of this debt. Home ownership is not really looking good in the future because again, even now people are experiencing housing instabilities. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what people's what people's responses in addressing student debt. Again, housing crisis. How are we going to address housing affordability? And even some foreign policy issues. A lot of young people are interested in what's happening around the world, not just in their respective communities. And so it's gonna be a really interesting year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it goes.
Yeah. So like last two things, one of more about you now. One of which is just where do you see yourself in the next 10 years and what do you generally hope to accomplish? Obviously, there's a lot of things, but what is your goals right now?
Yeah. My goals for the next 10 years has been the same of how it was for the past 10 years or 5 years, I would say. I want to be doing what I've set out to do when I started my educational career, my professional career. I want to be at the center of helping people, helping my community, whether that's through activism, advocacy, organizing, whatever it might be. I want to be part of change in my communities. And I hopefully run for office, whatever that looks like, whatever seat that looks like, be in a position where I can influence change, and be a voice for the silenced, be an advocate in my community. Um, and that's pretty much it. I want my professional and personal life to be one of service and to be one where I'm looking out for my neighbors and for those that are often forgotten in our communities, like immigrant population, Black and brown folks, our unhoused folks. I want to be able to be their voice in this decision at the decision making table. And so I want my next 10 years to be of service, of advocacy, of activism, and standing up for what is right in my community.
Right. And last thing is, what message or advice would you give to your fellow members of Gen Z and people like me?
Build those relationships. I would say that's the first thing. Build those networks, build those relationships, because again, as mentioned before, I think this is our time to stand up and lead our communities. And it's going to take those that came before us, and their wisdom and their help to get us there. And so build that network, build your resume, make sure that you're going out and volunteering and being in your community, and working in campaigns, speaking up in front of city council. When you see something not being done, go talk to your representatives, go talk to your elected officials so they know who you are and you are involved in, again, in that decision making table. Running for office and being a representative or a senator is not the only way to influence change. And there's a lot of ways you can be a change maker tomorrow, the next hour, in your community, by helping someone in need in your community or by speaking up on an issue that matters most to you. And we're seeing that now, for instance, even with the help of social media, how young people have been using social media in ways that we've never seen before to advocate for issues like those that are being harmed in communities across the world, like in Palestine and in different cities across the nation. And so I again be find a way to be a part of that change, and being an elected official is not the only way to pursue that. And so find ways in your everyday life, in your week and your month, to create that change, to be a part of that change, and speak up for what's right in your community.
Sure. Thank you so much for the advice. And I really loved your energy and the time you gave me today.
Wonderful.
I hope that we can talk again. But again, thank you so much for the time you gave me, the opportunity, and just speaking with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.